I just can't get over how brazen these card trimmers have been. It's pretty laughable that somebody could be this stupid to do what they've done, and really keen to get your thoughts on this because it's bloody crazy. Hey everyone, Dan the Cardman back again. Welcome to another video. Very glad to have you here. Thanks for joining. Now, I was actually going to postpone this video for a couple of days, maybe to my weekly news video on Sunday or a bit later than that, but I just thought it's really hot right now. A lot of people are talking about it, and I think there's a unique perspective that I want to touch on that hasn't been talked about into too much detail just yet that I think you viewers will be really keen to understand. But just as you saw by the intro, today we're going to talk about some trimmers out there that have been so brazen with their approach to doing this. It's just so crazy to me that somebody could be this stupid. Like, obviously, you're going to have people ripping off people in any hobby in life, right? That's how people are. But to be this brazen with your own personal accounts, with your own personal eBay accounts, is absolutely mental. And there's a very high chance that you're going to see some charges and legal matters coming out of this, in my opinion. Now, we'll get started with card porn. So they've done a really good summary of this, and I'll get to the blowout forums in an instance because that's basically where this came to light. But just to give you some context, right? This individual here, Kong Cards, Kong53, and I'll put a link down as I always do to card porn stuff, but basically these individuals went out and were actively chasing Contenders cards, right? And to be specific, they were Panini Contenders from 2021, and these are the cards that are flagged as of right now that are being of concern by the guys out at Blowout Forums. It's obviously not an exhaustive list, it's always updating, so keep an eye out for that, and I'll get back to that in a second. But they were actively trying to chase these cards, so much so that there was Instagram posts from this individual, other posts on forums, videos, I believe as well, that were clearly outlining, okay guys, we want these cards, we'll buy them, we'll pay any price. And then, I never saw this actually, but I'm surprised nobody actually caught on. And a lot of people remember that obviously, but it just seemed a bit strange to see people actively chasing and buying these cards when you need to understand what these cards are actually like, right? So these 2021 Panini Contenders cards are typically an entry-level product, right? And they're printed on very thin cardstock. And what that means is the quality of them is not always the best, okay? But what it means from a trimmer's perspective, because they're very much like paper in a sense, they're really easy to trim without damaging the card, okay? And that's why these individuals were actively chasing them to try and cut down the cards. So there was some crazy prices coming up, and like I said here through Card Porn's post, you can see who's buying them is very clearly the same. The Kong guy, very clearly his eBay page, right? It's just crazy to buy them with your personal account. So they bought that card, obviously trimmed it, relisted it, got it regraded, got a 10, and then now is selling it for a crazy price, right? And a lot of people have been caught out now having bought these cards from this seller. Now, even if they haven't trimmed every card, because it's hard to prove they're not numbered cards, right? People have done analysis and things like that to see that they are the same card, or they're comfortable enough to say they are the same card. But even if they're not, it's a bit hard to trust this person when there is like so many cards coming from them that have been confirmed to have been trimmed, right? And I'll get to my points in a second by unique view, but you can see here the comparison that people have done. Please check out Card Porn's post because they do highlight a lot of this stuff in multiple instances. Please check it out. I'm not going to take their credit. They've got another post here where they're talking about a different seller doing the same thing. Lamim James also did a really good job reporting on this because they both have big followers, right? Not everybody has access to this post on here. Well, not everybody reads forums these days, and Blowout's the biggest one, but not everybody deep dives into it, so you may have missed it. So really good on them to flag it. But the reason why I think this is extra concerning is that the grading companies didn't pick up on it, right? And the point I want to give to you is this, and this is that unique point that I want to talk about that not many people are touching on. How many times have you bought cards? Okay, you've bought a bunch of trading cards, you've stacked them in a pile. How many times have you noticed a card wasn't uniform with the rest of that series? At least in my opinion, I don't recall seeing that too often. From what I see when I hold my cards together and things like that, they are from a specific set. They all seem to be the same size. There might be some marginal differences in there, but I'm just really surprised that the graders have missed this trimming. And just before I go into the detail on that, you can see the full detail here. They've done a full deep dive. Check this out on the Blowout forums. I'll put a link down below. You need to see this because it's really good analysis, as is always the case with the guys on Blowout that are calling out bad behavior, but it's just mental. And the point I'm trying to make, and I'm going to go back to my full camera, the reason why I flagged the grading companies, right, is because I'm very surprised they don't have a procedure in place or policy in place to know what the dimensions are for a specific product from Panini, okay? And I've touched on this before when it came to some graders grading cards that have had a sticker auto placed on them that never came in a sticker auto. Like, my logic was, when I commented on that back then, I'll get to my point in a second, was that if I'm a grader, okay, I'd be contacting every single manufacturer, okay, and I'd be building some sort of database on my internal platform that outlined what a card, like what an insert card looks like in that particular set, what an auto looks like, what the autos are on. So when you're doing a grade, when you're grading your cards, right? As a grader, you can go into that platform. Okay, Panini's confirmed to us that this is what these cards look like. These are the cards that have autos. This is what it looks like. Now you can't accidentally grade the incorrect card with a sticker that was obviously very clearly frauded, right? You might still make that mistake, but at least you've got this database you can compare back to. And that same logic applies to these, right? I don't understand why PSA, BGS, etc. don't contact Panini and say, okay, guys, we want to uplift our standards, we want to uplift our grading. Can you please tell us like what the average card dimension size is, width, height, and things like that, thickness for Panini Contenders for 2021? And then Panini would say, okay, this is what the cards are meant to be. We have this level of tolerance in terms of QC. So you might see some deviations. So then when they come to review a card, they can, because they're looking at it digitally as well, right? They can check the dimensions for the card. And for something that's been trimmed, it might be fairly obvious that it has been trimmed, right? Because it might be outside of Panini's threshold. And then if that is the case, then you might have other questions following up, or PSA or BGS might turn around and say, actually, we don't feel comfortable enough to grade this, right? And that's what I'm most surprised about. Like, people can talk about how this individual for doing this is really bad, and yes, they are. Shouldn't trim cards. I think it's really dodgy. You've ripped off a lot of people. They've raised a lot of question marks on now that people have bought cards for their PC that now may not, even though they may not be confirmed to have been trimmed. You can't be comfortable with that, and nobody's going to buy it from you because everyone's going to be turned off these cards now. In particular, the ones that they can confirm that have come from this seller, even if it has been trimmed or not, like I just said. So it's just a huge can of worms, and I think a lot of the question needs to go back to the grading companies as well. And I've got a video coming out next week that's going to do a bit of a deep dive into why I think the grading companies need to do better in general. And I think a lot of people have those thoughts, but I'm going to share it from the perspective of my external audit experience, my business experience, right? Why? Because now they're charging so much money to get cards graded. The upcharges on expensive cards is so much higher. There's so much money in the hobby. They need to be able to uplift their process for reviewing and things like that to meet the same level of standard that the market expects them to. And right now, grading trimmed cards that I think could be more easily identified than what they're doing right now is a big red flag for them, for graders as a business. And it's just crazy that you could potentially have this sort of loophole happening and getting missed when there's so much money to be made. It's almost fraudulent. You'd almost need some sort of regulation to stop this long term, because I think regulation might come into play eventually when you have the amount of money and these are seen as a tangible investment opportunity for people. But my general point is, why can't, and maybe they are doing this and maybe this is something they just slipped through the cracks, but I would imagine they would have contacted Panini and said, oh, okay, I've got this, and then it's not a Panini card, but I've got this Skybox medal from 2020. You guys say that the dimensions are X, Y, Z, or thickness, length, width, things like that. The card I've got in front of me doesn't meet those. You'd call them and be like, okay, does this make sense? Is this something that could be genuinely come from you? Or maybe they're trimming a little bit too much, so then the card's outside that threshold. And then PSA as a company can say, actually, guys, we don't feel comfortable grading this. We can't grade this for this reason. And some of you might say, well, that's unfair for the person sending it in, even if it wasn't trimmed. But like as a business, as PSA, right? And I keep saying PSA, it's applicable to every grader. But as a grader, you need to feel comfortable that what you're doing is free from error. And if you follow that approach that I just said and you can't get comfortable, then you shouldn't be grading it. You shouldn't be grading it at a pity for the customer, as an example, because we can't confirm it's been trimmed. If it falls outside your tolerances, then you shouldn't touch it. And in this case, that probably would have saved a lot of these cards getting graded. And then a lot of collectors, unfortunately, getting some of these cards in their hand that they've paid top dollar for that are now worthless because they've been trimmed. It's just a bit crazy to me, and I know I rambled a little bit there, but that's the point I just wanted to make. Like, I think the graders can do a better job identifying this stuff. Even if they've only taken a minimal amount off the edges, like, I think they have to take a little bit more than that, but be really curious to see whether it still fit within the tolerances like outlined by Panini when they're producing this product. And if it does, and the mistake still occurs, then like, what can you do, right? It's a really hard thing to identify, but it's just something that I think needs to be done, and this mistake wouldn't have happened. And I'm very curious to see if you've bought some of these cards yourself, what your thoughts are on this. Like, obviously, this person is now going to get into a lot of trouble, as outlined by Cardporn and the guys, because they're idiots. They've clearly used their own personal accounts to buy these cards. People have done a bit of analysis, like I said, to see that the card is, in fact, the same card that now has been graded in a higher grade. Some of the issues, chipping, edge wear, is gone on those cards. These people are going to have a lot of problems on their hands in the near future. To do something like that with your, like, to be so brazen in the first place, to use your own personal account, to be so active on social media, chasing these cards down, and then all of a sudden going AWOL when people start questioning you is It's really stupid, but I guess that's why they're criminals in the end, right? Because this is criminal behavior, ripping off people, committing fraud. Like, they're not the smartest people in the first place, right? So you sort of reap what you sow. That's sort of it. I know I rambled probably a little bit too much. I hope you liked the video. Again, I just wanted to make that point very clear that the graders are to blame here as well. They need to do better with uplifting their processes, and that suggestion I just gave might be a way for them to do that. So can you get your thoughts down below? As always, thanks for watching. Please give me a like, give me a follow if you haven't already. Check out my weekly news video down on Sunday. Not down, it's coming out on Sunday, so please check that out. If you haven't already, I'll quickly jump back to my other screen. Check out the video down below. I do a comparison between old and new PSA labels to see which one you should buy, because I think there's a bit of a play when it comes to old labels. So please check that out if you haven't already. If not, that's okay. I love communicating with you guys, so please drop a comment. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.